Today is World Snake Day, a day to celebrate the beauty, diversity, and importance of the world's snakes. And I can think of no better way to observe this day than to take a quick look at the rattlesnakes, the most unfairly feared and vilified of all American snakes. Most of us Americans spend very little time thinking about rattlesnakes except as objects of fear. We rarely bother to appreciate how fantastic they really are. They comprise about 50 species of pit vipers, all with tails that are tipped with a series of complex, interlocking cornified scales, completely unlike anything else known to have been evolved by snakes, until very recently anyway. These reptiles are not only specialized at their very tips, the musculature of the tail itself is dominated by 3 pairs of shaker muscles. 2 of these muscle pairs wag the tail back and forth, while the 3rd pair applies torsion, drawing the bottom edge of the rattle outwards to either side. The fibers of these muscles are richly vascularized and adapted at the cellular level to be able to sustain the high respiratory levels necessary to vibrate the tail as fast as 100 hertz for as long as an hour at a time. These speeds are unequaled among cold-blooded vertebrates, and among warm-blooded animals, only the hummingbirds can vie with the rattlers in this respect. The rattling system's main function is to warn away dangerous animals like predators and large grazing animals. Although in some of the small rattlers known as massasaugas, it's only audible at very close range, and it appears to be of very little use in this area. I've never witnessed a wild mammal interacting with a rattlesnake, but many times I've seen how effective rattling is in deterring domestic enemies like dogs and horses. Whatever the first proto-rattlers used their tails for, they probably enhanced an already existent behavior. A lot of unrelated groups of snakes engage in similar tail shaking. It can be a prelude to battle or mating, or a means of evading predators. Some burrowing boids, like Calabar pythons and rubber boas, wave their blunt tails about while hiding their heads. Some elapid snakes, like this Langsdorff's coral snake, confuse their enemies by moving both ends simultaneously. Many snakes, including some vipers, vibrate the tail defensively. When they do this against dry vegetation, the resulting sound is not unlike a rattlesnake's. Defensive tail-shaking snakes, like this gopher snake, they lack the specialized tail musculature and they can't sustain the motion more than a few seconds. But it's interesting to note that the tail muscles of the copperhead, a cousin of the rattlesnake, have a significantly elevated respiratory capacity. The traditional view of rattlesnake evolution suggests that rattles evolved to enhance this behavior, and since the earliest known rattlesnake fossils were found in the American Great Plains, it's tempting to visualize the first rattler warding off vast bison herds like in this painting. Genetic mapping, though, points to the southeastern USA as the likely origin of rattlesnake evolution, severely shaking this attractive theory, so to speak. A third form of tail movement uses the tail as a lure. This is called caudal luring, and it's a pretty common behavior in vipers and a number of other snake groups. It's possible that the earliest rattlesnakes drew potential prey within striking distance by writhing and twitching a simple rattling tail appendage. Some of the little massasaugas that were mentioned earlier practice caudal luring, particularly the young ones. In fact, in many of the more typical rattlesnakes as well, the rattle could function more as a caudal lure in newborns, which can't produce sounds until after they shed their skin for the first time. As the growing young snake's diet shifts from insects to lizards to mammals, the rattle's effectiveness as a sounding device increases, and the bold colors and patterns on the tail tend to fade. Both caudal luring and defensive tail shaking are behaviors seen in the copperhead. A new species of viper sheds a bit of new light on the subject. Back in 2006, Pseudocerastes urarachnoides was described from 2 specimens collected in Iran. The first one, an adult male, was collected in 1968 and placed in Chicago's Field Museum. At the time it was identified as a Persian horned viper, but its tail bore a strange appendage that looked like a small wind scorpion. It was assumed to be a tumor or something, until a second specimen, a young male, was collected in 2003. The tails of both specimens were carefully examined and confirmed to be normal and uninjured. The assumption was that these structures were caudal luring devices, and subsequent observations have confirmed this. These vipers appear to specialize in feeding on birds that are attracted to the bogus arthropod on their tail. Perhaps something very similar adorned the tails of those early American pit vipers that were the ancestors of our modern rattlesnakes. Happy World Snake Day!